This is Crested Butte real estate agent Frank Consella with the Crested Butte is Home podcast, and this is my first episode with two guests, and they each took separate paths to get here to the Gunnison Valley, but after spending a little bit of time in California learning their trade, they made it back here to follow their passion, and their passion is wine. Joe and Shamai Buckel run the Buckel Winery in Gunnison, and so this episode we spend most of the interview talking about all things wine. Today on the Crested Butte is Home podcast, my guests are Shamai and Joe Buckel. So first, tell me a little bit about each of yourselves and where you're from and that type of thing.
So I'm Joe Buckel. I grew up in Indiana, so from the Midwest, like a decent amount of people in Colorado, it seems like, getting out of the flatland and coming to the mountains. Did my education there, went to Indiana University, graduated with biology, chemistry major. And so kind of that got me into the realm of science and moved me out to Colorado. I worked for Indiana University, doing some protein chemistry, and then moved to Colorado, Denver, working for the University of Colorado Health Science Center, also doing protein chemistry in a research lab there. It took about a year after moving to Denver to realize that was really boring profession, sitting in fluorescent lights in a cinder block room for most of the day. That's when a friend of mine, Clay Staley, was moving down to Crested Butte, and he asked if I wanted to come down here and check it out with him. Pretty much that was in 1996, and ended up moving to Crested Butte at that point in time. Shamai moved around that same time, my wife, and we met in Crested Butte. So we've been together, I don't know, since 2000. Is that correct?
2000.
We moved from here in 2004 to Santa Rosa, California, to specifically get into the wine industry, or allow me to do that, I guess, which ended up being a 5-year stint around in Sonoma County, around Santa Rosa, working for 3 different wineries out there. Starting our own label, with a couple friends called Taj, TAJ Cellars. And then, like I said, worked for a winery in Sonoma Valley, Sonoma Coast, and Russian River Valley. And then in 2008, we had the opportunity to move back to Colorado, which was fantastic, to be able to work for a winery in Southwest Colorado. I'll let Shamai go ahead, and then we'll go from there.
I was actually born in Colorado, born in Pueblo, Colorado, and then lived in Morfino County until I was about 10. And then our family moved to Santa Fe, and we spent most of our formative years there. And after I graduated high school, I actually came to Crested Butte because I wanted to check out the skiing. Western wasn't at the top of my list, but I definitely was interested in doing more skiing. So I actually talked my mom into coming here my senior year. She's not much of a skier at all, but we stayed at the Grand Lodge, which was called something different then.
The Grand Butte, or was
Yeah,
the Grand Butte or the Marriott? Yeah.
It was the Grand Butte. And talked her into coming up for the weekend. It just dumped. I think it was like a foot a night. And I just skied all day. My mom said she only saw me, she tells the story like she only saw me for dinner time for 3 days. So it was really fun. And I was like, wow, that's what Crested Butte's all about. I'm moving there. So I actually ended up moving here in 95. I talked to my brother, Willie Mushton, into coming with me, and ended up going to Western, and then met Joe, and then he kind of gave that history, but definitely graduated from Western with a bachelor's of arts in health promotion and wellness.
Okay. All right. Sounds like both of you guys are using your degree, which is not necessarily that common, but we'll get to that. So Shamai, I mean, you mentioned you were a skier. What about you, Joe? Were you a skier, hiker, mountain biker, any of the outdoor stuff that we do around here, or did that come later?
Definitely more of a mountain biker than skier, but had to quickly catch up in the skiing on the mountain.
Well, I guess that. I mean, do you still both do that quite a bit, or does your business take up too much of your time to get out?
We really try to. That was, one of the things that we contemplated when we decided we were going to start our own label, and we knew we wanted to do it in Colorado. We kind of explored a handful of different areas and thought through, what we wanted out of our business, but also as what we wanted, lifestyle wise. And that was for sure one of our deciding factors in coming back to Crested Butte. Definitely the skiing. I would say the mountain biking as well. We were in Cortez, which is a phenomenal mountain biking area, kind of new, but not so new. I mean, a lot of people know about it because of the 24 hours at Mesa Verde, right?
12 hours
12 hours at Mesa Verde, which is a great race at Phil's World. So that area has really amazing mountain biking. It's more, riding mesas versus climbing to the tops of mountains. So different style of mountain biking for sure. Nonetheless, a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. There's a bunch of, I mean, you've got Durango and Dolores and lots of good biking down there for sure. So, well, cool. Well, I mean, you already mentioned the, wine. So, and it sounds like you actually had like a kind of a long-term plan, which is, sometimes people just kind of stumble into their career, but it sounds like you were thinking this through a bunch. So talk about, why wine and why you decided to go out to California and start learning the trade.
Sure. So my family's definitely been into wine for a long period of time, kind of like you hear with the old Italian families, food and wine, and it's just always around the dinner table, and obviously always sitting down for dinners. And so you can have a time to sit and talk with the family, catch up, try to figure out what's going on. And that was a nightly occurrence. That's something that, the nightly dinner, wine was always incorporated with food and definitely around all the time for special occasions. So I'd have to say, growing up in our family and, like I said, sitting down at the dinner table with wine and food was a staple essentially in our lives. My family was definitely into it a little bit more than I would say the average family. When you're with my parents, they collected some wines. They like to travel to wine regions. So I can remember from about 18 years on, going to first California wine regions, Napa and Sonoma, and actually, and then started exploring, Washington a little bit. Never really did Oregon, actually. That's what we did. And then the family also did some traveling over in Europe, doing bike tours, hitting wine regions. When you're talking Bordeaux or the Rhone or Burgundy, Italy, some different places like that. So I always thought it was just a really, they were always set in really beautiful settings, and just the vineyards themselves were always meticulously done, and it was just very attractive. It was very beautiful to me. Where the vineyards were, where the wineries were, and just the landscape and architecture of it all, I guess. So being here for a while and, having that background, doing chemistry and wanting to do something more with that. And while we were here, it was a lot more of the tourism industry and the, construction industry, which are, dominant industries in our valley, when you're talking a career, making a living. So anyways, after doing a lot of that for about 8 years, I wanted to try to do something with the degree I had, with something that I thought I'd be passionate about, because obviously still looking for that also. Something that, having a career that actually makes you want to get up in the morning and do it, and you think about it constantly, and not in a dreading it way, in a very motivated way. So that was the motivation behind it for sure. And that was the motivation in 2004 for us to move to, Santa Rosa, California, essentially, and, do something that ended up changing our lives and being really fun.
I was just going to say, when we got to California, we lived in Santa Rosa, and one of the first wineries that we actually visited on our own was called Siduri, and it was a warehouse winery in Santa Rosa. So with all these fires, it was actually right in that zone where a lot of those fires have impacted the town of Santa Rosa. And it was just a warehouse and, a winemaker who really was passionate about Pinot Noir, most notably.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But we went to this warehouse winery and we're like, this is cool, and with all that wine region and the kind of the beauty around wine is oftentimes the vineyard aspect of it, but that's also the really expensive aspect of having or making wine is, buying that land that you can then grow vines on. So we were always kind of enamored by this different style of making wine, which was, in a warehouse and a little bit more, down home, kind of rustic. So we were kind of aiming for that as we moved forward with our own projects.
Gotcha. And I think I understand that. I'm picturing it in my head, but could you explain what a warehouse winery is versus a regular winery, or however else you want to differentiate it?
Sure. For the most part, when you kind of think of winery, I guess in layman terms, you have lots of vineyards, say, surrounding, a building that's essentially the production facility. And so it's usually, and that's kind of what the people would call an estate winery or estate wine. And say, it's like 10, 20, 30 can be just enormous places. And then a winery on site with a tasting room. Sometimes there's quarters for people to live. Sometimes, owners, management, whatever, live on the property. And that's a really, like Shamai said, that's a very grand way of going about it, especially these days, just because price of land, price to, a farm, all that, all the people you got to have on staff when you're talking tasting room and managing your vineyard and having that look pristine and essentially doing everything. When Shamai was saying, when we walked into this winery, it's Siduri, and it was essentially downtown Santa Rosa, actually just off downtown in the warehouse district. And like Shamai said, it almost burned in 2017 when those fires creeped in on Santa Rosa and really did some damage over there. But it's very much like, say, I don't know if you're familiar with Denver, obviously.
Sure.
So if you go on the southwest side of Denver, actually they grow a lot of marijuana there these days, but it's a lot of warehouse facilities in that area. That's kind of what this part of Santa Rosa was. So it's very much a warehouse district. And so there's all different kinds of stuff, like say there's a furniture company, and then there's, there's something else in there. There's a mechanic.
Sure.
And then
UPS shipping.
Yeah.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden there was this winery, and it was very early on in this, kind of progression of this type of winery. So it was very eclectic in this warehouse scene. And then in the not in the middle of it, but one part of it, there was this winery, barrel storage, they had all their production there. They were making it from grape to bottle essentially, but in their model, they didn't own any vineyards whatsoever. They were buying fruit from growers and then bringing it into their facility and then making wine in this facility. So like I said, very industrial, very warehousey. And that model actually took off. People realized, oh my gosh, I don't have to buy a ton of land, have a ton of vineyards, make that investment, because you make that investment in the vineyard and you're waiting 5 years to get a single grape off that thing.
Right.
So it's, you've eliminated that part of it to, basically make a winery and a label and something that can move forward and actually have success with. And so since then, we've actually seen a lot, even complexes made for wineries. And so all of a sudden now you have a whole area that has 20 wineries all jammed into these warehouse facilities. And there's nothing else around that's not as eclectic as it once was.
Well, maybe there's an ice cream parlor or, or a restaurant or
to complement,
something that would complement it. Maybe a brewery even. There's one in Paso Robles that I'm thinking of in particular, that there's kind of, they've kind of made it a destination in itself.
Right.
It's called 10 City, TIN, 10 City. And it's like Shamai says, it's a destination. There's a cidery, there's wineries, there's an ice cream shop, there's a brewery there. It's like, all in one fun.
The bus will pull up and bring you there.
Yeah. Makes sense. In the Crested Butte Real Estate Minute, I wanted to do a neighborhood spotlight this episode and do that on Meridian Lake. So the Meridian Lake area is up Washington Gulch and has some of the most amazing views of the ski area. Plus it has easy access to Long Lake and the Snodgrass Trail, and it's also a really nice, quiet area. Check out what's available by visiting CrestedButteRealEstateAgent.com and then go to the Property tab and the Neighborhoods tab to find Meridian Lake. And you can find all the other neighborhoods there as well. You can check the show notes for the link to that. And this is Frank Consella. Give me a shout if you have any questions about real estate, 970-596-7990. And let's get back to the show. So why, I guess Gunnison, because you guys both had a history here, but we don't, as far as I know, grapes don't really grow, at least in this valley. Obviously they do over in Paonia and Palisade. So what's your process? You guys are getting your grapes, I believe, on the western slope, but how do you go about sourcing it and all that?
So we basically source our grapes from the western slope. And that's one thing about Colorado is unless you're in Palisade where 80% of the grapes are grown in the state, you really are trucking your grapes or moving your grapes during the fall, which is harvest time, to wherever your winery is. So there's wineries in Boulder, Denver, Hotchkiss, Palisade area, obviously Paonia, and then down in Cortez. And that's where we were for a period of time. And we would purchase, grapes would be brought from Palisade on every harvest season. So we knew that trucking grapes, unless we wanted to live in Palisade, was going to be part of what we were going to do as a winery. And so we really chose Crested Butte because we liked the area. We knew we had a lot of connections still here in terms of friends and entrepreneurs. And then we also realized that as much as Crested Butte's in the middle of nowhere, it's in the middle of the state. So you can get essentially anywhere in 3 hours. We actually had a couple come into the winery recently, and they had flown in from Florida and driven to this place that they rented on VRBO, which said,
centrally located for the
in
southwest part of the state of Colorado. Centrally located. They were in Powderhorn.
Well, I guess that's sort of central.
Sort of central. That's what we think. It's sort of central.
So when you're sourcing these grapes, are you going over there? Are you checking out, the places where they're coming from and checking out the grapes and what can you learn from the grapes on a year-to-year basis as far as what kind of wine they're going to end up being, I guess?
Yes, so we do. Since we moved to Cortez in 2008, obviously we've had a lot of experience with the growers in Colorado over the last decade plus. So we have, a very good, contact list of growers and people that we work with consistently year after year. Being in California, one of the first things I had to do with the jobs that I would acquire is I always had to go out to vineyards, see what they were doing. The winemakers were always like, Joe, you go see what's happening, go talk to the farmer, go see if they're, they got grapes this year, go see what they look like and report back. So I was always talking with grape growers, and closer to harvest that they always send me out to do testing. So test the grapes and see what numbers we come up with so we can kind of calibrate what kind of a time we want to pick the grapes. So when I came to Colorado, basically I kept that same philosophy and mindset. So basically after making relationships with these growers, one of my first questions is, do you mind if I go into your vineyards? I do like to see the progression of what happens, and it allows us to figure out what does happen. Like, for example, in 2019 in October, we saw a freeze on October 10th. Well, that besides, making it an early harvest, and the grapes came in very early because we had to harvest everything at that time because you really can't let grapes after a freeze sit on the vine anymore. What we noticed was it caused a lot of bud damage. So the next year's grape harvest was going to be severely impacted by that. Going out into the vineyards, seeing how many grapes were out there, knowing what was going to happen, it kind of allowed us to plan for the 2020 harvest, because we knew that there was a lot of shortages, and being ahead of that game and having that knowledge, we could contact growers and try to make up for those problems. Other times we see different things. We'll see maybe bugs in the vineyard. Leaf hoppers is a very common example of something that can cause some damage to the vines and also cause like a problem with the ripening. We see sometimes powdery mildew out there. Same thing, causes some problems with the ripening and health of the vine. So we get into these vineyards, we track them all through the season. We do a lot of analysis during harvest, and these growers that we've been working with, and we've kind of chosen them this way, is then we can tell them when we want them to pick the grapes. A lot of the growers will like to tell you when the grapes are ready. And that's, they're not making the wine, they're just farming the grapes. So we like to get into situations where they allow us to make those calls. So we do a lot of work with the growers and a lot of back and forth, and it's a very collaborative relationship.
It seems like that'd be the only way it would work. So, so what's the process then? So they harvest the grapes, and then what happens next? All the way up until it hits a bottle of your wine.
Do you want to go?
Yeah, it's a fun process. So we do the analysis in the vineyard, and that's really looking mostly at sugar and pH. And when you're talking sugar in wine, what you're measuring is Brix, what the Brix level is. So there's, a nifty little, what's it called? Refractometer that you use to measure that. And that can be done actually right in the vineyard. And then we also measure the pH, and those are the two numbers that we use to just determine when to pick the grapes.
Besides eating them, we like to eat grapes.
Yes, that's a very good point.
They're yum.
So we eat them, we taste them, see what they taste like, and also look at the seeds. So there are a few parameters that you look at there. And then also in the vineyard, just walking the vineyard, you start to see, are the majority of the grapes ripe? Are they becoming overripe? Kind of looking at that. Obviously, it's a vineyard, and so there's many rows of grapes, and so you kind of have to take the average of it and go from there. So then once we make the pick call, the grapes get picked, and then we go over and put them on a trailer in bins, and those bins come back to the winery. If they're treated differently, white grapes will go directly into a press, and our press is a big machine that basically takes the grapes, the skins, the seeds, all of it, and turns it into juice. So it squeezes it. It's got a bladder on the inside, and that bladder compresses down and juice comes out of it. So with the white wines, the grapes go directly into that press and they're pressed out. And then we have the juice, and that juice ferments. And then with the red wines, we actually skip the press initially, and we just start a fermentation with the skins, the seeds, and the insides of the grapes, basically. Mm-hmm. And that, those fermentations in both reds and whites can go anywhere. I mean, you like to extend them out a little bit, but they can be, let's say 10 to 21, 30 days. We actually still have a fermentation going right now from this year. So it was picked in October. So it's over a month October. Now. It's probably over a month that it's been going. So, fermentations can go for a while. During that fermentation process, whether it's red or white, we're actually checking numbers every day. So we look at temperature. We're measuring the sugar as well, and which ultimately will kind of equate into alcohol level. And then
we do check acidities right when they come in. but that's very early on in the process. Just kind of seeing what numbers the grapes arrived at. When you're talking the sugar levels, which we measure in bricks, or the acidity, which we're using the pH meter essentially to get a decent idea of where it is. Anything of these things out of too high or too low, if the alcohol is too high for the most part, it can make a wine hot, taste like hot to you. If with the acidity, if it's too high or too low, it can either taste really tart or we call it flabby. So obviously we're trying to pick on these numbers, giving us a balanced wine. So we do all those numbers right when the grapes come in, or we squeeze the juice, or we're starting our red wine fermentation to get an idea of where we are if we need to make any adjustments.
And then at that point, then they age in barrels. And then how much longer is that then?
Yeah, so with the white grapes, like Shamai was saying, the juice goes into tanks, stainless steel tanks. We do those fermentations. Usually our white wines, when you're talking Sauvignon Blanc and Rosé, is what we made this year. We're trying to get them ready for the springtime. So they stay in stainless steel the whole time. We do some stabilization to them, and then we do a little bit of filtration, and then they're ready to bottle, say March.
Yeah.
And then
like 6 months.
And then we're ready to release them in the springtime. We've been making since last year a new style of wine. It's called a pet nat. It's the full name of it is French. It's pétillant naturel. And what it means is naturally sparkling wine. And what we do with that is we're just fermenting it down to a certain sugar level, very low. And then we crash the fermentation by making it very, very, very cold. So the fermentation will stop because the yeast don't really like the cold. Mm-hmm. And then we'll go ahead and bottle it into sparkling wine bottles and bottle cap it with a normal bottle cap like on a beer bottle. And then we'll let that warm back up. And in the cellar, warming back up, the fermentation will start again, and it will naturally carbonate the wine. So you might see these things on the shelves. They're kind of becoming more popular. Pet nat, P-E-T-N-A-T is what that is called. And like I said, it's pétillant naturel for short. It's probably the oldest way they've been making sparkling wines, way before, the champagne method or method champenois. But it's a fun style of wine, and we're working on our second batch right now. The first batch is already in bottles and fully carbonated, like very carbonated right now. But those will be ready for release in the spring also. We'll have those are quick turns for us. Now, when you get to the red wines, that's something a little bit, different. Basically, those fermentations end, like Shamai was mentioning, they were fermented on the skins. We're trying to get as much color out of them, as much structure as we can out of those grape skins. And so basically, once that fermentation is finished, then we take those vats and put them in the press, squeeze them, get all the juice out, and essentially all that goes into barrels, like you were just saying. Yeah. Some of that wine is aged for 10 months. Some of it is aged for 2.5 years, kind of depending on what wine it is. Just to give you an example, our Pinot Noir or Cinsault is something that doesn't need as much barrel age. So we barrel age those about 10 months and then get them ready to go into bottle at that point in time. Our red blend, which is mostly Cabernet Sauvignon from year to year, the blend kind of changes, but is mostly Cabernet Sauvignon, usually takes 2 years or more in the barrel before we bottle it. So it just kind of depends on how heavy the wine is and how much time it takes to age something, is how many years it might be in the barrel.
Got it. Makes sense. You guys could kind of be called craft wine. I'll throw that out there. And we saw like craft beer really kind of get going in the 90s, and more lately we're seeing, craft distilleries. Have you connected, just out of curiosity, with, Montana or Coal Creek or the breweries around town? And I mean, is there any cross collaboration with some of the ideas that you can do that they can do, or is that not really a thing? Am I making that up?
Answer that, or
Yeah, I think I think it is a thing. For sure. We definitely have sold barrels to Montagna for their aged rum. What's that one called? The Oro, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So there is some of that, there's some sharing happening, with when COVID all hit, Irwin Brewing actually borrowed our labeler because they all of a sudden needed to, get some beer in a can so that they could get it out the door because they weren't, selling it out of restaurants as readily as they had been. So there is some sort of that sort of collaboration occurring. One thing that you can make from spent grapes is grappa.
Oh yeah.
So you could ferment that, or distill that, not ferment it, but distill it down and make a grappa out of it. And so, there is more potential for collaboration. Absolutely. And as I don't know if in Palisade, there's Peach Street Distillery, which is also, there's some connection there with like Ska Brewing. So there is, and they're in Palisade, which is wine country of Colorado. So there's definitely, I think, more room for collaboration, but definitely something that we see those as our, definitely our comrades here in the Gunnison Valley.
Cool. Yeah, I was hoping that was the case. Well, I am definitely not a wine connoisseur by any means, but if I wanted to develop my palate, can I, or is it something you're born with? I mean, when I read wine labels and it says, hints of X, Y, and Z, I don't know. I don't necessarily get it. So what's your take on that?
No, I think, and Shamai can, attest to this too. That's for sure. I think a lot of times, having exposure just to different herbs, you cook with and different things like
spices.
That, different spices, even just different fruits. If you take a moment and smell what strawberries smell like, like smell first thing of strawberries or blueberries or any fruit for that matter, I think you get a better idea of how, how to pull those, things out of smelling a glass of wine. I'm not going to lie to you. It's complex, and honestly, I'm not as good at it as say even Shamai is better at pulling flavors and nuances out of wine than I am, and but definitely can do it also. People train to do it. There's ways to do it just with jars by say putting different herbs in jars or just different spices in jars, so you're like solely concentrating on what that thing smells like and then smelling that and then bottling it back up. There's these on sale that definitely in wine stores and different places. When you're talking like UC Davis, University of California Davis has an amazing wine enology and viticulture program. Like in their bookstore, you can get like, I think it's 32 different essences, and you're talking like cherry and blueberry and blackberry and and then cardamom and what chocolate or cocoa would smell like and
leather tar.
Yeah, leather tar. All this stuff. It's pretty amazing. And yeah, obviously it's like anything. If you do anything for a good amount of time and try to like train yourself on these certain senses, yeah, you're going to be able to pick them out on wine. That's for sure. Now, yes. And like you just said, some people are way better than other people, just, right out of the box. Like,
yeah,
they can smell something and pull like 10 things out of the freaking wine. But, that is not like, I am not that good. That's for sure. Like I said, Shamai is way better than that. Go ahead.
I would say if you wanted to start playing with that, idea of learning more about wine, you would start by, you get a wine glass. It could be any glass. It doesn't even have to be a wine glass, but you want to fill it like a quarter of the way to a third of the way. So you're not even halfway full, so that you can actually move the wine in the glass. Because when you swirl the glass, the wine, once it's moving, will let off aroma. And then when you start, don't try drinking it at first, try just smelling it. And I usually give it 3 times, just trying to smell the wine when I'm trying to figure out what's notes are in the wine. for example, when we're making our back label, we put in some tasting notes. So we've got to come up with some ideas to begin with before we even put it out on the market. And so we're going to swirl the glass and just smell. And when you smell, it's like, you don't always, I mean, you put your nose in different places too. You know, if you've got your glass, you go kind of deep and then back off and kind of smell in different distances as well. And, you know, let the wine settle and smell it then. So just trying to play around with, you know, smelling it. It's a time thing, you know. That's I think one of the beauties of drinking wine, and probably why it became so popular in the European culture, is because it's an experience. You know, it's really something that, again, you're sitting down at the dinner table, or maybe you're just sitting down for drinks with friends, but you're sitting down and taking time to, you know, establish relationships with people and get to know people and, you know, enjoy a bottle of wine. So it's a slow thing. So you want to have time to kind of smell it. And then after you've put your nose on it a few times, then you start to taste it. And, you know, you're going to have different tastes, you know, on the front of your tongue, on the middle of the tongue, and in the back. And then you're also going to have different tastes, you know, at the beginning of the wine and at the end of the wine. And sometimes it'll stick to different places in your mouth, and kind of something will jump out at you. And sometimes it's something that you really like, and other times it's, you know, something that you don't really like. There's a harshness to it. And, you know, that's common as well. We're really looking for, when we're building our wines, which is kind of more the art of it, the blending aspect of making wine, you're really trying to create something where it's pleasant the entire time it's in your mouth, and it maybe finishes with something that's enticing or exciting versus just finishing flat. So you kind of build your wine to have, you know, a little bit going on the entire time it's in your mouth.
That all totally makes sense. Well, so in speaking of this whole experience, you guys do tastings, right, at the winery? And or not?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
So we have a tasting room that's open from 2 to 7 on Friday and Saturday right now. You can make an appointment for any time during the week, but that's just kind of the hours that we're set open. But like I said, people can make appointments anytime. We're pretty flexible that way. We're getting
our booking reservations going on our website, and that should be up and running in the next few weeks here. So, and then people will be able to book online as well. And we're trying to, you know, be sensitive to the COVID thing. So we're offering, you know, some tastings outside of our regular business hours. So if people want to come in, you know, and have more of a private experience where they're, you know, getting more of our attention, but also not exposing themselves to a lot of people, we kind of have built an opportunity for those folks as well.
And on that same note, we've done some Zoom tastings in the past, and it really had some fun and success with that. So, you know, that's something we'll probably keep moving forward with in the future. And
so that the customers getting their bottles of wine ahead of time, and they're saying, okay, you're saying open this one, let's talk about this, and okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And are you doing food pairings at these too?
Sometimes we do.
Those are typically more done in like a wine dinner fashion. So we do and have done wine dinners with different restaurants. We've done them in people's homes, but also in actual restaurants. So that's something that we're looking to put together more of this winter for people as well.
So this is along the same kind of lines as my previous question about wine and being a connoisseur of it or whatever. But with the tastings, what are you looking for as far as pairings? What makes food A go with wine B?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, I think part of it does come down to preference and food style, but there's definitely, it's easily Googleable is one thing that I would say. But also, there's a couple of ways to go about it. One is you go for more of a complementary pairing with the food. So for example, Chardonnay out of all the whites tends to be a little bit richer. There's a little bit more mouthfeel going on. It's richer. A lot of Chardonnays, not all of them. There's quite a few now that are not aged in barrel, but a lot of them have some barrel time, which makes them a little bit different than the average white wine. And it makes them a little bit more like a red wine. So they get from that barrel, they'll get some vanilla and some caramel flavor to it. They also go through 100% malolactic acid fermentation, which means they just have a little bit more of mouthfeel to them. And those, I think, go really nicely with, like a stone crab and butter, something that's a little bit richer. So they complement each other really nicely. I think you can also go for wines pairings that are more opposite. And what do you think would be a good example of that?
Sometimes like a really rich dessert, something really sweet actually pairs well with something a little bit more acidic when you're talking like a Riesling, because the acidity and the sweet actually complement each other, where you actually, you really wouldn't think that would be the case. It's doing opposites instead of doing likes,
right.
Like is like, a lot of times too with, these are kind of classic, but, a red wine, a heavy red wine like Cabernet Sauvignon or a red blend or Cabernet Franc is going to go with like red meat or, elk this time of year, with everybody getting the fresh stuff. But anyways, there's these complementary things where kind of, the big red meat going with the big red wine. But obviously, like Shamai is saying, sometimes it's a very opposite type thing. And then, even when you're talking like super spicy hot food, this like sweeter style wine will go with it. So and that's another like contrasting, flavors coming together and making a really good pairing. There's a lot of diversity in it is the bottom line. And I think a good way to go is obviously just trying things out, here and there and just seeing how it works, just because sometimes things, like your, say, Sauvignon Blanc does really well with some cheese and fruit and nuts, and you're kind of like little platter of like appetizer type stuff, or, it does well with the salads and light fish. But then again, there's some random style pairings that like do very well. So I think it's just trying to be adventurous. And like Shamai said, look it up on Google. A lot of times, when we're, an appetizer for the, we have this wine and what would be a good like appetizer with it or creation with it, or even going the other way. So I think that's obviously always a good way to learn, but it's fun to experiment. It's fun to fail terribly. And then every once in a while you succeed brilliantly.
Well, and it's like you said, if it works for you, it might sound gross, but people like things that sound gross to other people. So it's, whatever works.
Oh, totally.
But we talked about this a little bit, or you kind of mentioned it. People love to travel and visit, vineyards. It's a big thing about it. So, and they're often in beautiful areas. Do you still get to do that? You mentioned doing it with your family when you were younger, but obviously not now with COVID, but you still travel quite a bit to other vineyards and.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes, we find a lot of pleasure in that. We definitely like food, and we definitely like wine, and we like beautiful areas. So getting out and doing that is a lot of fun for us. We last year around this time, actually, we were in California in that San Luis Obispo area and checked out a handful of wineries there. Mm-hmm. Spent, I think, 4 days there. So that was a lot of fun. And then before that, our last visit was we were in Sonoma, actually. And then before that, we were in Oregon. We went to the Willamette Valley area, which is near Portland, which again is another amazing food hub. And then, just down the valley there is the Willamette Valley. And so that's a really interesting area because it's, within an hour and a half to Portland, which is a big city. So that region's definitely come a long way and find some great experiences there.
How about internationally, or mostly stick to the West Coast?
Mostly stuck to the West Coast. Yeah, that we definitely need to I keep talking. We keep talking about this. We need to go to Italy because everybody grows grapes and drinks wine and eats good food. So, and there's just lots of fun things to do. But we'd like to and we enjoy the wines from there. So we'd like to explore that area a little bit more, or we'd like to explore that area a little bit more.
And the other areas I would say is Champagne. We want to check out Champagne, France. And then actually we've heard a lot about the Mexico wine region, which is kind of south. It's south of San Diego, but it's also kind of up in that where the mainland goes down and Baja goes down. It's kind of up, and it's up on the upper side of Baja, but it kind of stretches into that mainland a little bit as well. So that region seems like a fun place to go check out as well.
And there's reportedly some very good wines coming out of there. So sounds like great fun and good wine to be had at the same time. So
that's interesting. You don't hear about Mexico very often. Chile and Argentina, and obviously the areas that you were talking about earlier on the West Coast here.
I think we will more and more. I think this area is going to become more well known. It's an easy strike, from here. So I think that's pretty high up on our to-do list at this point in time. And even last week we decided to go. We were kind of turn around over in Paonia Hotchkiss area. Most of those guys were, they were closed down, had their season and done, but, called them up and wanted to check out their facilities and talk to some old timers and check out some new wineries. And it was, we had a really good time. It was a lot of fun and got to chat with a lot of people but we're, that's just something we're always trying to do, whether it be far or near.
Well, I'll give my own little 2 cents. About a year ago, I was lucky enough to be in Porto, so I got to visit the Duomo Valley and all that, and I would highly recommend that one. And my wife Brittany and I, and actually on our honeymoon, we went to the Azores, which nobody ever seems to know. And the vineyards there are they're a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it's all volcanic rock, and they built up these crazy volcanic squares. And then the vines would have some protection from the sea and stuff. Super, super cool. So yeah,
that's really fun.
Yeah, that was a neat area. I'll have to thank Anthony Bourdain. I have to give him credit for getting us to go to the Azores because we were watching an episode of that, and we're like, all right, that's where we're going. But
nice. Well, it's cool because when you think about wine, you also, we didn't talk about this a lot, but you touch on soil. And so if you're in volcanic soil, it's going to create such a different profile to your wines, even if you're using, varietals that are common in, let's say, Napa or Sonoma, places that other people are real familiar with. Yeah. So you're just going to bring out different flavors, and it's going to be, create different, differences that you wouldn't actually necessarily think about a whole lot until you start looking more closely at the soil.
Yeah, exactly. The Azores were known for their dessert wines, and apparently the Russian czars, that was their thing. They would like the Azorean dessert wines. I don't know. That's pretty awesome. Random, but anyway, well, let's start to finish this up a little bit. Now, the Gunnison Valley is home for you, so why the Gunnison Valley?
Well, we do have a couple children. We have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old. The schools were definitely a big draw for us, being in that Cortez area and just starting to touch on education. We have some friends in the valley who are, within the school system, work in the school system. And we just knew how good it was. And that was one of the main draws, to come back here, besides having a very good, friend group here and lots of connections that way and people we've stayed in touch with, since we lived here. I think that was, those two things were pretty big on our list. We were, having lots of friends and having lots of connections here, and then, having such good schools. Both those things were pretty huge. And as, Shamai touched on earlier, being able to touch Denver, touch Telluride, touch, the Grand Junction or Roaring Fork area, Vail, the I-70 corridor, all within 3 or 4 hours was, kind of a draw. Being down in Cortez, you realize how isolated from the rest of the state you are. To get to Denver, can be an 8-hour trip on a good day. So we kind of realized that was a, kind of difficult proposition down there. And we definitely wanted to this is not much more populated than Cortez area, but it does definitely sees more people, more tourism. And like I said, just closer to, to major populations. And then obviously it presents itself for the recreational things like we like to do, like we touched on earlier. We both ski, we both mountain bike, we both like to get out and hike and play and cross country and love the mountains. So this is a really nice area for us. And then Shamai's family is down in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So it's nice to be close to them also. And also that cuisine.
Definitely. Well, I will make sure that your website and social media is in the show notes. But other than that, where can people buy your wine locally?
We have a great representation locally. We're really grateful to the small business owners of the Gunnison Valley for supporting our project and our passion. We are found at the Brick Oven, at the Last Steep. Both of those places carry our wine on tap. So they're carrying, 4 of our wines. And I think you can get it's a good value for a by the glass price. Can't beat it. So definitely those are great places to check it out. The Divvy up on the mountain carries a few of our varietals. Marchitelli's has our Rosé by the glass, as does McGill's, Wooden Nickel. Mm-hmm. Princess Wine Bar is, a great place to check out our wine because, Ruta knows wine real well. And she carries a couple of our varietals all the time, kind of rotating through seasonally. And then pretty much all the liquor stores up and down the valley carry our wine. Awesome. You can also get the wine at the Dive in Gunnison. Am I missing anywhere else
they have the Rosé
in
by the
town?
glass.
There may be some people who have our products and, bought them a while ago and are still running through it. But those are the main places. Oh, and Public House.
Oh, yes.
Public House for sure. So well represented. You can go just about anywhere in town and get a glass of our wine.
Yeah. And like Shamai said, if you wanted to pick up bottles, Acme, Mountain Spirits, Treasury up on the mountain, and then down in Gunnison, High Mountain Liquor, Sportsman's, Gunnison Liquors, and Secret Creek.
And here in CB South at Red Mountain.
Oh, yeah. It's like you said, just about everywhere. That's awesome. You got a good showing here locally. Anything else I should have asked?
No, I think you covered it really. Right. I guess the one other thing that I would just emphasize is like that there's the science to wine, which is obviously what drew Joe to winemaking, but there's also really an art to it. And that's where you get to kind of play and be creative and make decisions as a team and create products that you think other people will really enjoy.
Awesome. All right. Last question. Who else should I interview?
Do you have any recommendations?
I don't know. I was thinking about it earlier and then I totally spaced
out. I would recommend Megan Payton, and I may be biased because she's one of my best friends, but she has been a guide in Crested Butte since 1997. She's been on ski patrol, and she owns her own small business, Horizons Fine Gardens. So that'd be my recommendation.
Actually, that's what I was thinking too.
Perfect. All right. Megan would be good. I know Megan, and she would definitely be a good interview. So awesome. Well, thanks for taking some time and really appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Crested Butte is Home podcast. You can find all the episodes on your favorite podcast player, or you can also visit CrestedButteIsHome.com to find the episodes there, as well as real estate information. My contact information is also there at CrestedButteIsHome.com. And thanks for listening. And this is Frank Consell. I'll be back in a couple weeks with another new episode.